I didn't know a person could survive a fire and still lose more in the silence afterward. But that was the first thing I learned when I woke up in room 312 of St. Mary's Hospital at 3:17 in the morning. The room was dim, washed in that cold blue light hospitals seem to save for people who are not sure whether they are still part of the world or only passing through it. My throat felt dry, my chest felt heavy, and my right hand was wrapped so thickly I could barely tell it belonged to me. Every breath carried the faint taste of smoke, medicine, and something metallic from the oxygen tube resting beneath my nose. I tried to move, but my body answered with a slow warning, not sharp enough to make me cry out, just deep enough to remind me that the Ethan Miller who had run into his woodworking shop 2 nights earlier had not been the same man they carried out. For a few seconds, I didn't remember everything. I remembered snow falling over Cedar Hollow. I remembered orange light pulsing inside the windows of my shop. I remembered someone shouting that Noah was still inside. Then I remembered heat, a locked door, and the strange smell of gasoline where gasoline had no reason to be. I wanted Lauren. That was my first clear thought. My wife. My home. The woman I had spent 11 years loving in the quiet, ordinary ways a man believes will be enough. I wanted her hand in mine. I wanted to hear her tell me I was safe. But the chair beside my bed was empty. Her coat was gone. The flowers on the windowsill still had the price tag tucked behind the ribbon, like she had bought them in a hurry and left even faster. Then I heard her voice in the hallway. The door had been left open a few inches, and sound traveled through that narrow space like a secret looking for somewhere to land. At first, I thought she was talking to a doctor, so I kept my eyes closed and listened for my name spoken with worry. Instead, I heard her whisper, low and angry, "He should have died in that fire. At least then I wouldn't be chained to a burden." The machine beside me gave a small, faster beep. I forced myself not to move. I forced my breathing to stay slow. There was a pause, then a man's voice answered, smooth and familiar enough to turn my stomach cold. Victor Hayes, the real estate agent who had spent months trying to convince me to sell the land under my shop. Lauren said, "No, he doesn't know anything. He can barely stay awake. And even if he does, look at him now. What is he going to do?" I lay there with my eyes shut, my face half covered in bandages, and for the first time in my marriage, I understood that silence could be protection. I had built our life board by board, paycheck by paycheck, morning by morning. I had put her dreams before mine so many times that I stopped counting. I had believed love meant staying patient when someone changed, forgiving the small cruelties, explaining away the cold looks, carrying the weight because that was what husbands did. But in that hospital bed, listening to my wife talk about me like a piece of damaged furniture she wished the fire had taken, something inside me went still. Not dead. Still. There is a difference. Dead things do not listen. Dead things do not remember. And I remembered more with every second. The side door of the shop swinging open when it should have been locked, the smell of gasoline near the finishing room, the sound of metal dropping behind me before the smoke swallowed the hallway. Lauren's heels clicked farther down the corridor, and Victor's voice faded with hers. I opened my eyes just enough to see the thin slice of light under the door. My right hand trembled beneath the blanket, useless for now, but my mind was clear. Lauren thought the fire had turned me into a burden. She thought pain had made me weak. She had no idea that the man she pitied, blamed, and wished away had already brought one thing back from the flames that she could not burn, the memory of what should never have been there. Before the fire, people in Cedar Hollow would have told you Lauren and I were one of those couples who made sense from a distance. We had the white farmhouse at the edge of town, the long gravel driveway, the wraparound porch she filled with expensive planters every spring, and the kind of Sunday morning routine that looked peaceful from the outside. I owned Miller Woodworks, a shop my father had started in a 2-car garage before I was born, and Lauren ran a small interior design studio on Main Street with her name painted in gold letters across the front window. To most people, we were a success story. A hard-working husband who built custom cabinets, farmhouse tables, and cedar mantels, and a stylish wife who knew how to turn empty rooms into something magazine-worthy. What people did not see was how much of our life had been held together by quiet sacrifices I never thought to mention. When Lauren and I met, she was renting a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in Burlington and driving a 12-year-old sedan that needed a jump every time the temperature dropped below 20 degrees. She had talent, No question about that. But talent does not pay deposits, buy sample books, or cover 6 months of rent while a business tries to breathe. So I sold the old Mustang my father left me, the one thing I had promised myself I would restore someday, and used that money to help her open Lauren Miller Interiors. I told myself it was not a loss. It was an investment in us. For the first few years, she made me believe she saw it that way too. She would come by the shop with coffee, sit on a stack of lumber in her jeans, and talk about the houses we would design together one day. She used to say she loved the smell of sawdust on my jacket because it meant I had been making something real. But success has a strange way of revealing what gratitude was hiding. As her studio grew, Lauren started correcting me in small ways that felt harmless at first. She bought me shirts I did not like and said they made me look less like a handyman. She asked me not to wear my work boots when I stopped by her office, even if I had only 5 minutes between deliveries. At dinners with clients, she would laugh too quickly when someone made a joke about blue-collar husbands, as if she needed them to know she belonged on their side of the table, not mine. I told myself she was under pressure. I told myself ambition could make people sharp around the edges. Every morning, I still made her coffee the way she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, in the white mug with the tiny crack near the handle. Some mornings she took it without looking up from her phone. Some mornings she left it untouched until it went cold. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But marriage teaches a man to confuse patience with strength, and I had become very good at carrying things without asking why they were getting heavier. The only place I still felt completely myself was the shop. Miller Woodworks sat on 4 acres just outside town, backed by pines and a narrow creek that froze over every January. My father's old sign hung over the front door, weathered but proud, and inside there was always the steady music of sanders, saws, radio static, and men calling measurements across the floor. I knew every corner of that building. I knew which floorboard squeaked near the finishing room. I knew which window stuck in July. I knew the side door by the storage area locked from the inside unless someone used my spare key. That detail would matter later, though I did not know it then. 2 weeks before the fire, Victor Hayes came by the shop wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost more than my table saw. He smiled like we were old friends and told me the land under my shop was worth more than the business sitting on it. I told him I was not selling. He glanced around at the dust, the old beams, the men working with their hands, and said, "Everything has a price, Ethan." I remember wiping my palms on a rag before answering. Not everything worth keeping does. That night, Lauren was unusually quiet at dinner. She asked, almost casually, whether I had ever thought about what life would look like if I stopped working so hard. I said I liked working hard. She looked at me across the table as if that answer embarrassed her. I did not understand it then. I only remember the untouched coffee the next morning, the cold porch light, and the feeling that my wife had started standing on the far side of a room I could no longer cross. The night of the fire began with a phone call at 11:28, while Lauren and I were sitting on opposite ends of the living room pretending the quiet between us was normal. The television was on, but neither of us was watching it. Snow tapped softly against the windows, and the porch light threw a pale circle across the front steps. Lauren had been on her phone most of the evening, typing fast, turning the screen slightly away whenever I shifted in my chair. I was too tired to argue, too tired to ask who kept needing her attention that late, so I let the silence sit there like another piece of furniture. Then my cell phone rang. It was Noah, one of my youngest workers, his voice shaking so badly I almost did not recognize it. He said he had gone back to the shop for his wallet and smelled smoke near the finishing room. The line crackled, and then he said something that made me stand before I even understood I was moving. "Mr. Miller, I think the back hall is filling up." I grabbed my coat and keys from the hook by the door. Lauren looked up, not scared exactly, more startled that the night had interrupted her. "What happened?" she asked. I told her there was smoke at the shop and that I had to go. For half a second, something unreadable crossed her face, something too quick to name. Then she said, "Call the fire department." I already had. Cedar Hollow's volunteer station was 5 miles out, and I knew every minute mattered when old pine beams and finishing materials were involved. The roads were slick, the kind of slick Vermont gets when snow turns to ice beneath your tires, but I drove faster than I should have, one hand tied on the wheel, the other dialing Noah again and again with no answer. By the time I reached Miller Woodworks, Orange light was moving behind the windows like something alive. Smoke rolled low across the lot. The main door was locked, but the side door near the storage area stood open just enough for snow to blow inside. That was wrong. I knew it before I knew anything else. I had locked that door myself at 6:10 that evening. I stepped closer and smelled it through the smoke, sharp and out of place. Gasoline. We kept stains, sealants, and mineral spirits in proper cabinets, but gasoline was never stored near the finishing room. Never. Then I heard Noah calling from somewhere inside, muffled and frightened. I did not think about insurance. I did not think about land. I did not think about Lauren or Victor or any dinner conversation that suddenly felt less casual than it had before. I thought only of a 23-year-old kid who still called his mother on lunch breaks and had no business being left alone in a burning building. I pulled my coat over my mouth and moved through the side entrance, staying low, following his voice past the workbenches and the rows of lumber I had stacked with my own hands. The shop I loved had become unfamiliar in minutes. Shadows jumped across the walls. The air was thick, and every step felt like walking through a memory being erased. Near the back hall, I saw the finishing room door had been propped with a metal wedge I did not recognize. Another wrong thing. Another detail my mind kept even as the rest of the world blurred. I found Noah crouched near the supply shelves, coughing, panicked, but able to move when I got an arm around him. We made it halfway back before something heavy shifted above us with a sound I still hear in dreams, not as a crash, but as the groan of an old building giving up. I pushed Noah forward toward the cleanest strip of air I could see, and he stumbled out through the side door into the snow. I followed slower, much slower. The last thing I saw before the lights became a smear was Lauren standing near the edge of the lot in her cream-colored coat, her face lit by the fire, not running toward me, not calling my name, just watching the shop burn as if she were waiting to see what would be left. Behind her, half hidden near the road, was the dark shape of Victor Hayes' SUV, its headlights off, its engine running, and when the cold finally took the noise out of the world, I carried one thought with me into the dark. Someone had opened that door before I arrived. Coming home from the hospital should have felt like proof that I had survived, but the house on Maple Ridge Road had never felt less like mine. Lauren had hired a medical transport service instead of driving me herself, and when the van pulled into our gravel driveway, she was standing on the porch with her arms folded inside a beige wool coat, looking past me toward the road as if she were expecting someone more important. The driver helped me into a wheelchair because my legs were still weak, and every bump in the walkway sent a quiet reminder through my ribs and shoulder. I looked up at the porch where I had carried Lauren over the threshold 11 years earlier, where we had painted the railings together one 4th of July weekend, where she used to sit barefoot with lemonade while I sanded cabinet doors in the garage. Now there was a folding ramp over the steps and a plastic bag from the pharmacy hanging on the doorknob. Lauren opened the door before I reached it and said, "The nurse told me you should stay downstairs for a while." She did not say our bedroom was upstairs. She did not say she had made it comfortable for me. She pointed toward the living room, where a narrow rented bed had been pushed against the wall beneath our wedding photo. The photo showed us smiling beside Lake Champlain, young and sunburned, and certain that love was something steady. Under it, the bed looked temporary in the cruelest way, like I was a guest who had overstayed a welcome I never knew had expired. I thanked her anyway, because pain had made me polite in places where anger should have stood up. For the first few days, Lauren moved around me with the tense efficiency of someone completing an obligation. She set pill bottles on the coffee table, taped printed instructions to the refrigerator, and reminded me not to leave marks on the sofa with the ointment from my bandages. She did not ask about the nightmares. She did not ask why I sometimes woke before dawn with my left hand gripping the blanket. When neighbors dropped off casseroles, she softened her voice at the door and told them we were taking things one day at a time. The moment the door closed, her face changed back. She kept the curtains half drawn because, she said, the afternoon glare bothered her. I knew it was because people walking by could see me from the street. My reflection in the dark television screen became the only mirror I trusted. One side of my face still looked like me. The other looked tired, swollen, and unfamiliar beneath healing skin. Lauren removed the large hallway mirror 2 days after I came home. She said it was to make room for the walker. The hallway was 6 feet wide. On the 4th night, I woke to her voice in the kitchen, low but not low enough. I am 37 years old, she said into the phone. I am too young to spend my life taking care of a half-burned man. I kept my eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling while the furnace clicked on. Whoever she was speaking to answered, and Lauren gave a short laugh I had not heard since before the fire. Not warm. Relieved. The next morning, I found her cream-colored coat hanging by the back door. The same coat she had worn outside the shop that night. I did not mean to touch it. I told myself I was only moving it aside so I could reach my own jacket, but when the sleeve brushed my face, I caught it again, faint but clear beneath perfume and dry cleaning chemicals. Smoke. And under that, something sharper. Gasoline. My right hand would not close properly, so I held the fabric with my left and stood there while the house hummed around me. Lauren came in from the dining room and froze when she saw the coat in my hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. I said, "This still smells like the shop." Her eyes moved from the sleeve to my face, and for 1 second, she looked afraid. Then she stepped forward, took the coat from me, and said, "Everything smells like smoke to you now, Ethan. The doctor said that might happen." She carried it upstairs before I could answer. That afternoon, she was careful again, almost kind in a way that felt rehearsed. She brought me soup, asked if the temperature was okay, even adjusted the blanket over my legs when the physical therapist arrived. But I had seen the fear before the performance. I had smelled what she wanted me to doubt. And while Lauren thought she was living with a broken man who needed help standing, I had started counting the things that did not belong. The open side door, the metal wedge, Victor's dark SUV, the insurance papers she had moved from my desk, and the coat she hid in the upstairs closet before sunset. Rachel Carter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning with a canvas therapy bag, a travel mug, and the kind of calm that made the whole house feel less fragile for the first time since I came home. Lauren had scheduled her through the hospital network, though she made it clear she considered it one more inconvenience placed on her calendar. She opened the door, gave Rachel the quick polished smile she saved for clients, then said she had calls to make and disappeared upstairs before Rachel had even taken off her coat. Rachel was around my age, maybe a little younger, with practical brown hair pulled back at her neck and eyes that did not slide away from my bandages, my stiff shoulder, or the way I kept my right hand tucked against my side. That alone made her different. Most people either stared too long or pretended there was nothing to see. Rachel did neither. She set her bag beside the rented bed, washed her hands at the kitchen sink, and said, "Mr. Miller, I am not here to feel sorry for you. I am here to help you get back as much of your life as possible, and that means today is going to be annoying." It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in days, and somehow it made me trust her. She started small, with movements so simple they would have embarrassed me if she had allowed embarrassment into the room. Lift the cup, set it down, open the fingers, close them halfway, breathe through the frustration. Rest before pride turns into damage. I failed at most of it. My hand shook. My shoulder tightened. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck, though the thermostat was set to 68 degrees. From upstairs, Lauren's voice drifted down now and then, light and cheerful on the phone, the version of her that still belonged to the outside world. Rachel noticed. She did not comment. When I dropped the plastic cup for the third time, it rolled under the coffee table, and I muttered that maybe Lauren was right about me being more trouble than I was worth. Rachel paused, looked at me straight, and said, "Pain does not mean you are finished. It only means the part of you that survived is asking what comes next." I wanted to laugh it off, but the words stayed. Later, while she helped me practice standing without leaning too hard on the walker, my sleeve pulled back and showed the faint bruise around my left wrist, where Lauren had grabbed me the night before when I reached for the insurance folder on the dining room table. Rachel's eyes went to it, then back to my face. She did not ask a question that would force me to lie. She only said, "You should not be handling recovery alone." I told her I was married. The room went quiet in a way that made the answer sound thinner than I intended. Rachel packed her tools slowly when the session ended, then slipped a business card from the side pocket of her bag and placed it face down beside my medication list. "A friend of mine is an attorney," she said. "Daniel Reeves. He helped my family after my brother died in a warehouse fire 6 years ago." The official report said accident at first. It was not. I looked at the card but did not touch it. She lowered her voice. "I am not saying your fire was anything like that. I am saying strange fires often have strange details, and people recovering from them are easy to convince they imagined things. Before I could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Rachel straightened, zipped her bag, and was smiling politely by the time Lauren entered the room. Lauren looked at the card on the table, then at me. "What is that?" she asked. Rachel said, "A referral, in case Ethan needs help navigating medical paperwork." Lauren held her smile, but her eyes sharpened. After Rachel left, Lauren picked up the card between two fingers as if it were dirty. "You do not need a lawyer," she said. "You need rest." I took the card from her with my left hand, slowly, carefully, and for the first time since the fire, I did not apologize for making her uncomfortable. That night, while Lauren slept upstairs behind a closed bedroom door, I sat under our wedding photo with Daniel Reeves's card on my knee and the house silent around me. I thought about Rachel's brother. I thought about the smell of gasoline. I thought about the coat Lauren had hidden and the way Victor's dark SUV had waited near the road with its lights off. Then I reached for my phone and typed Daniel's number one digit at a time. Daniel Reeves did not sound surprised when I called him, and that was the first thing about him that made me feel less foolish. He listened without interrupting while I told him what I remembered, what I had smelled, what I had heard in the hospital hallway, and what Rachel had said about details that people try to explain away. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mr. Miller, do not accuse anyone yet. Do not warn anyone. Do not move faster than your evidence." 2 days later, he picked me up in a gray pickup truck and drove me back to Miller Woodworks. Lauren thought I was at a medical appointment. I let her think that, because by then I had learned that truth should not be handed to someone who had already tried to bury it. The shop looked smaller in daylight, not because the building had shrunk, but because so much of what made it alive was gone. Yellow caution tape moved in the wind. The roofline sagged over the finishing side. Snow had turned gray where ash settled over the lot, and the sign with my father's name hung crooked above the front entrance. Daniel opened the passenger door and helped me out slowly. I hated needing help. He noticed, but did not make it worse by pretending not to. "You said your father kept records in a fire safe," he said. I nodded toward the back office, or what was left of it. Getting there took longer than it should have. Every step felt like walking through the burned shell of a life I had once known by touch. The workbenches were blackened. The measuring marks my father had carved into the main post were still visible under soot. Near the finishing room, I stopped. The smell was weaker now, thinned by cold air and time, but the memory of gasoline came back so clearly my stomach tightened. Daniel did not rush me. He only took photographs of the side door, the damaged lock, and the floor where the metal wedge had been found by investigators, but written down as ordinary debris. In the office corner, beneath a fallen shelf, we found the fire safe. My father had bought it in 1998 after a break-in, and I used to tease him for trusting a heavy black box more than any person in town. That morning, I silently thanked him. Daniel worked the dial with gloved hands while I watched my breath cloud in the cold. Inside were old deeds, payroll records, a few family photos curled at the edges, and a small external hard drive wrapped in a plastic bank envelope. I stared at it, confused, until I remembered the second camera system my father had installed years ago after tools went missing. The main cameras were obvious. This one was not. It faced the storage side and backed up to that drive once a week. Daniel looked at me and said, "We are going to make a copy before anyone knows this exists." By that evening, we were in his office above a closed bakery on Church Street, watching grainy black and white footage load across his computer screen. The timestamp read 11:42 on the night of the fire. Victor Hayes appeared first, walking quickly through the storage side with his collar turned up and his face half hidden, but not hidden enough. He used a key, not a forced door. A key. 6 minutes later, Lauren stepped into the frame. My wife. Cream-colored coat. Hair pulled back. Calm enough to look around before handing Victor something small and metallic. Daniel froze the image. I did not speak. There are moments when the heart does not break loudly. It simply stops defending someone. The footage did not show everything, but it showed enough. Victor near the finishing room. Lauren at the side entrance. The door left open afterward. The same metal wedge propping it wide. Then Daniel opened another folder he had pulled from county and insurance records. Lauren had updated the business interruption policy 2 weeks before the fire, using paperwork she had told me was routine studio accounting. But there was one thing she did not know. 3 months earlier, After a conversation with my accountant about protecting the men who worked for me, I had changed the primary payout instructions on the shop policy. If something happened to Miller Woodworks, the first funds would go to employee wages, medical support, and rebuilding operations, not directly into Lauren's hands. Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, "That may be why she is going to get impatient." I watched Lauren's frozen image on the screen, her face pale and the camera glow, and felt something colder than anger settle inside me. She had not just called me a burden after the fire. She had been standing near the match before the smoke ever reached my lungs. Lauren waited 9 days before she made her next move, and by then she had become almost gentle, which somehow frightened me more than her coldness. She brought my coffee to the living room each morning in the cracked white mug, 2 sugars, no cream, as if she remembered kindness only after deciding what it should cost. She asked about my therapy. She touched my shoulder when neighbors came by. She even sat beside me one evening while snow gathered on the porch rail and said, "Maybe this is a chance for both of us to start over." I looked at her hand resting near mine and wondered how many times a person could use the word start when what they really meant was erase. Daniel had warned me that people become careless when they believe they are close to getting what they want. He was right. Lauren started leaving folders in plain sight, not because she was careless, but because she wanted me to see them and feel small. One was labeled household transition. Another said medical capacity review. The third arrived by courier on a Friday afternoon, while Rachel was helping me practice walking from the living room to the kitchen without the walker. Lauren signed for it at the door, carried it inside, and placed it on the dining room table with the calm satisfaction of someone setting down the final card in a game. "We need to talk," she said. Rachel glanced at me, then quietly packed her therapy bag. Before she left, she squeezed my good shoulder and said, "Remember what we practiced. Stand before you step." I knew she was not only talking about walking. When the front door closed, Lauren opened the folder and slid the papers toward me. Divorce petition. Temporary control of marital assets. Request for evaluation of my ability to manage business affairs. The words sat on the page clean and professional, which made them feel more insulting. Lauren folded her hands and spoke in the soft voice she used with difficult clients. "Ethan, this is not punishment. It is reality. You are not in a position to run a company, handle insurance negotiations, or make decisions about property right now." I looked toward the hallway where the mirror used to hang. "And you are." Her mouth tightened. "Someone has to be practical." Practical. That was the word she chose for taking a wounded man's home, business, and voice while telling the town she was exhausted from caring. She said the house would be easier for her to maintain if it was under her control. She said the shop land needed to be sold before the market cooled. She said Victor had found a buyer willing to make a generous offer despite the damage. When she said his name, she did not look away fast enough. "Victor is helping because he understands the real estate side," she added. "Do not turn that into something ugly." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because she still believed ugly was something created by naming it. I asked if she had already spoken with the insurance company. She said she was trying to reduce my stress. I asked if she had already spoken with a doctor about my capacity. She said everyone could see I was struggling. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "You need to accept that the man who built Miller Woodworks is gone." That sentence landed quietly, but it changed the air in the room. For weeks, I had let her mistake my silence for weakness because silence gave Daniel time, gave the evidence time, gave the truth time to grow roots. I picked up the pen she had placed beside the documents. Her eyes brightened, just a little. She thought I was about to sign. Instead, I moved the papers back across the table and said, "I will have my attorney review them." The brightness vanished. "Your attorney?" "Daniel Reeves." Lauren stared at me as if I had spoken a language she did not know I understood. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the woman from the hospital hallway, not polished, not burdened, not patient, just angry that the door she thought was locked had opened from the other side. "Rachel gave you that name, did she not?" she said. I did not answer. She stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Fine. Bring a lawyer. Bring whoever you want. It will not change what you are now." She gathered the folders, but her hands were not steady. That night, she slept upstairs with the bedroom door locked. I sat downstairs beneath the wedding photo, my right hand aching, my left hand resting on my phone as a message from Daniel lit the screen. "Do not react. Mediation is scheduled. Let her walk in believing she has already won. The mediation was held in a glass conference room on the second floor of a law office in Burlington, the kind of room designed to make private pain look clean and manageable. Snow moved against the windows in thin white lines, and the long table reflected every face like a second, colder version of the truth. Lauren arrived 10 minutes late wearing a black dress, pearl earrings, and the expression of a woman prepared to be pitted beautifully. Victor came with her, not as a party to the divorce, according to her attorney, but as a real estate consultant who understood the value of the burned property. He shook hands with everyone except me. Lauren sat across the table and placed a tissue beside her legal pad before anyone had said anything worth crying over. Her attorney began with words like stability, medical uncertainty, responsible transition, and best interest, all polished ways of saying Lauren wanted control before I recovered enough to object. Then Lauren spoke. Her voice trembled at just the right moments. She said she had loved me before the fire, but the man who came home was angry, confused, and unable to accept help. She said selling the shop land was the only practical option. She said Victor had generously found a buyer willing to move quickly before the property became a financial burden. There was that word again. Burden. It passed through the room softly, but I felt it like a hand pressing on an old bruise. Daniel sat beside me without moving. He let her finish. He let Victor explain the market value, the development potential, the need for urgency. He let Lauren describe herself as a wife trapped between compassion and reality. Then he opened his leather folder and said, "Before my client responds to any proposed transfer of assets, we need to correct several statements made today." Lauren looked almost bored. Victor leaned back in his chair. Daniel placed a printed photograph in the center of the table. It was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. Victor at the side entrance of Miller Woodworks at 11:42 on the night of the fire. The room changed without anyone standing up. Lauren's attorney reached for the photo first. Victor said, "That could be anyone." Daniel placed the next photo beside it. Lauren in her cream-colored coat, 6 minutes later, handing him the key. The tissue beside Lauren's notepad remained untouched. Daniel did not raise his voice. That made it worse for her. He moved through the evidence like a man setting stones across a river. The hidden camera drive, the side door lock, the metal wedge, the insurance policy Lauren had updated 2 weeks before the fire, the buyer connected to Victor's firm, the messages recovered from a shared tablet Lauren had forgotten was still synced to our home account. He read only one line aloud. "Once the fire is done, he will be too broken to fight." No one looked at me after that. Not because they did not care, but because the sentence had made my injuries part of something uglier than misfortune. Lauren whispered, "That is out of context." Daniel nodded once, as if he had expected those exact words. Then he played the short video file. No dramatic music. No shouting. Just a silent hallway of my shop, my wife's pale coat, Victor's dark figure, and the side door left open to the snow. Lauren's attorney stopped taking notes. Victor's face lost its polished calm. He pushed his chair back and said he had been misled, that Lauren told him I wanted the insurance money, that she said the building was empty, that she said I would never question her because I always believed the best of her. Each word he used to save himself took something from her. Her story, her confidence, her beautiful grief, all of it collapsed in the fluorescent quiet. Lauren turned toward me then, and for the first time in months, her voice softened without performance. "Ethan, honey, please." The old name sounded wrong in that room. It belonged to morning coffee, porch lights, and a life she had treated like something disposable. I looked at her, not with rage, not with triumph, but with the tired clarity of a man who had finally stopped carrying what was never his to carry. "Do not call me that," I said. "You buried that man the night you hoped the fire would finish what you started." Her face changed. Not because I had shouted. I had not. It changed because everyone heard me, and no one corrected me. By the end of that afternoon, the asset transfer was frozen, the insurance company had been notified, the fire investigation was reopened, and Lauren walked out of the conference room without Victor beside her. She had come there expecting to prove I was too damaged to stand in her way. Instead, she left with everything she had tried to take slipping through her fingers, while I remained seated at the table, my right hand shaking, my left hand steady on the evidence she never believed would survive. By the time spring came back to Cedar Hollow, the old shop still smelled faintly of smoke when the wind moved through what was left of the walls, but it no longer felt like a grave. It felt like a foundation. The investigation took months, and I will not pretend those months were easy. Lauren lost the house on Maple Ridge Road after the court determined she had no right to control the property while the case was active. Her studio emptied faster than anyone expected, not because I told people what to think, but because truth has a way of traveling through small towns without needing help. Victor tried to protect himself by giving statements first, then disappeared from Cedar Hollow before the first thaw, leaving behind a closed office, unpaid bills, and a name people stopped saying out loud. As for Lauren, the last time I saw her during the legal process, she was sitting alone on a bench outside the courthouse in a gray coat I had never seen before, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone who had made choices she could know. Longer return. She looked smaller, but not because I had grown larger. She looked smaller because the life she built on appearances had finally run out of people willing to hold it up. I did not hate her in that moment. Hate would have kept me tied to the porch, the hospital room, the hallway whisper, the cream-colored coat, the word burden. I had carried enough. Daniel helped make sure the insurance funds went where they were supposed to go, wages for the men who had lost work, medical bills for Noah, cleanup, permits, and the first beams of a new building. Rachel stayed through my recovery longer than the hospital had originally approved because, in her words, stubborn men needed witnesses when they started becoming human again. She taught me how to button a shirt with one good hand, how to write slowly without apologizing for the shape of the letters, how to stop treating every tremor like a failure. My right hand never came all the way back. On cold mornings, it still ached before sunrise. Some tools had to be modified. Some jobs took twice as long. Some days I looked at a piece of maple or walnut and felt grief rise in me because I remembered what my hands used to do without thinking. But then Noah, the same young man I had pulled from the shop, would step beside me and say, "Show me how your dad did it." And I would. That was how the new Miller Woodworks grew, not from speed, but from memory passed carefully from one set of hands to another. 1 year after the fire, we opened the rebuilt shop on the same 4 acres outside town. It was smaller than the old building, brighter too, with tall windows facing the pines and a wide front door that did not stick in winter. Above it, we hung my father's original sign, cleaned but not repaired completely. One corner remained dark from smoke, and I kept it that way on purpose. People came with pies, coffee, tool belts, flowers, and stories. Rachel stood near the front window with her arms folded, smiling like she had known I would get there before I did. Noah gave the first tour and showed everyone the wall where we had mounted a charred piece of the old workbench beneath a simple brass plaque that read, "Not everything burned was lost." Near the end of the afternoon, I saw Lauren across the road. She stood by the stop sign in a plain blue coat, her hair pulled back, her face turned toward the open doors. For a second, the noise inside the shop faded. I thought about walking out. I thought about asking whether she was sorry, whether she understood, whether any part of the woman I once loved had been real. Then my right hand tightened around the edge of the table, weak but present, and I realized I no longer needed answers from someone who had mistaken my loyalty for blindness. Lauren took one step forward, then stopped. I turned back to the piece of cherry wood on my bench. It was the seat of a chair, the first one I had shaped mostly with my left hand. The lines were not perfect. Neither was I. But the wood was solid, and when I ran my palm over the grain, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. The fire had taken my shop, my certainty, and the marriage I thought I was saving by staying silent. But it also burned away the life that had been hiding the truth from me. Lauren believed I would come out of those flames less than a man. Instead, I came out with less to carry, and for the first time in years, that felt like everything.